Welcome back, everybody. This is the last video on the Reconstruction unit, and it is the section titled Redemption. Let's get started. One vocabulary word for the day, and it is redemption. It states white Southerners calling for the return of white supremacy and the removal of the rights of blacks. So where the South is headed now that the Compromise of 1877 has been reached. And one of the big deals of the Compromise of 1877 is that Jim Crow laws can more easily take effect and violence will not be impeded. And not only that, but there are also court cases that are saying that, yes, the government under the 14th Amendment cannot discriminate, but people can discriminate all they want. So Jim Crow laws come into effect. And in general, Jim Crow laws are going to be state laws that find their way around federal laws. They sidestep, they kind of weasel their way into coming into existence and not breaking the federal law, but going around federal law to accomplish some of the same things that happened prior to the Civil War and during the existence of slavery. If we go back to the Civil War, or the lead up rather to the Civil War with the 1850s, there was a lot of debate that surrounded slavery, and rightfully so. Some of that debate had to do with the type of laws that, not the type of laws. Some of that debate was around state law versus federal law. When did the state law have precedence? When did federal law have precedence? And that is in play here once again. Ultimately, what it all comes down to is that the Jim Crow laws that came into existence and continue on well past 1877 are laws that put restrictions on African Americans and their freedoms. So how do we see those freedoms being attacked? And look at everything that we see here. And right here, what we're focusing on are voting rights. So this is just kind of one area of the lives of African Americans where Black codes followed by Jim Crow laws are really having an impact. Earlier in the third part of the Reconstruction aspect of the unit, we had some vocab words, one of which was a poll tax, and you see that at the top of the screen. Next to that, you see literacy tests, though, again, another vocabulary word. If you keep moving around the clock, if you keep moving clockwise, you eventually make your way to grandfather clauses. Again, another vocabulary word. But there are other things here. There were a lot of new rules that were put into effect to accomplish the same type of restrictions with that existed prior to the Civil War or the end of slavery, with the end of slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. Behind the idea of redemption goes back to what was introduced in a previous lesson, and that idea was the way of life in the South. The South had a way of life that, leading up to the Civil War and during the Civil War, Southerners attempted to protect. So when we think about the term redemption, and we think about the South losing the Civil War, the Union being put back together, well, the South is looking to be redeemed. Reconstruction versus redemption. So look at this chart. We see on the left things that were in existence or what things looked like prior to the Civil War. On the right part of the right-hand side of the chart, you see the South post-Reconstruction. So prior to the Civil War, 1865, and after Reconstruction, 1877. And look at the similarities here. Agriculture on the left, agricultural system rooted in slavery. On the right, agricultural system rooted in sharecropping. Well, that's different, but there's a lot of parallels within it. On the left, second item down, slavery rooted in violence and oppression. Sharecropping rooted in violence and oppression. Was the black man and the black woman, were they raised up by 1877 and after 1877, or were they pushed down, and sharecropping continues to push them down through violence and through oppression? Third item down on the left, abolitionists fought to destroy slavery, and in this case, the institution of slavery as it existed prior to 1865, prior to 1863, prior to 1865, abolitionists fought to destroy slavery and they succeeded. But look on the right-hand side, abolitionists had achieved their goal. They did not hold the views of equality. So their job was done. Their job was achieved. There's a much bigger minority that is fighting for equality. And that's a big deal because that means the fight is done for so many. Very few are fighting for equality. In fact, we have heard and used the term radical Republicans. And radical is more of a normal type of term for how we view things today when it comes to equality. Equality was not the norm. It was a radical idea given the time. On the left, planters hold power. That's the South prior to the Civil War. Planters held power. Go to South post-Reconstruction, and we're in the same position. Planters hold power. On the left-hand side, next item down, civil rights restricted. We just talked about how after the Compromise of 1877 and how the South is redeemed, civil rights are once again restricted, just restricted in different forms. On the far left, blacks did not own land, and sure enough, they do not own land in the post-Reconstruction South. So on the far left, prior to the Civil War, slavery existed. South post-Reconstruction on the right-hand side, did slavery still exist? The institution as it was known prior to the Civil War, it existed. That institution, that form of slavery existed. So the question is out there for you. Did slavery still exist after Reconstruction came to an end? On top of that, we'll add one or two more items. We have two R terms that we wrap up with. We have Reconstruction and redemption. It appears that Reconstruction has failed when Reconstruction came to an end in 1877. There are a lot of problems, at least in the civil rights arena, at least in the lives of African Americans. And then there's the competing term, redemption. The South was redeemed in so many ways, and that brings us back to a term that we had earlier or that not necessarily a term, but an idea, the Southern way of life. Prior to the Civil War, the South was fighting for aspects of their way of life. And in so many ways, that way of life will continue after Reconstruction comes to an end. For today, that's it. This video is the last one for Reconstruction, so it is time to get ready for that unit exam. See you next time.